Hello, everyone. From Layla, myself, and the rest of the London Australian Film Festival team. I hope you're having a really good festival. Hope you've enjoyed it so far. And I hope you kind of, I guess, enjoyed. I'm not sure if that's the right word, but got something, I guess, out of He Ain't Heavy, a really important film that we really were quite keen to screen. Layla and I actually tried to get this film for last year's festival. Couldn't quite make it happen, but so we're really glad that we could make it happen this time around. As I'm sure we probably already said in the introduction, um, we chose this film for a whole range of reasons. In part for the fact that it tackles some, quite raw but very important themes that I think are relevant not only to Australia but also to international audiences. Um, Also, in part because it's centered around three really brilliant performances. And also, of course, because it is a debut director. And one of the things that we are really keen on at London Australian Film Festival and the Film Society we do when we do screenings all through the year is really giving space to up and coming directors, to people directing their first feature films. And a big part of that, of course, is the closing gala of every festival, at which we award the Cris Jones Debut Director Prize. For those of you who don't know, Cris Jones was a British Australian director, so a British director based in Australia, who made a really brilliant feature film called The Death and Life of Otto Bloom many years ago, which premiered at Melbourne International Film Festival. He came over to our first festival and was the closing film for that. And very sadly, a few months later, he passed away. So we have kind of ever since every festival we've finished with a feature debut. And then a couple of years ago, we basically got the approval from the family to kind of formally name it. We'd always done it in Chris's honor, but to formally name it the Cris Jones Debut Director Prize. So we're really privileged to be able to continue honoring Chris's legacy, but also to celebrating up and coming filmmakers. And so, without any further ado, I guess I should introduce this year's recipient, the 2025 recipient of the Cris Jones Debut Director Prize, David Vincent Smith. Welcome, David.
Oh, thank you so much. That's really beautiful words, and really, again, appreciate the festival supporting our film and sharing what's really important to us with an audience, and
Lovely.
hopefully generating a discussion.
Yeah, well, I suspect it will, and I'm looking forward to chatting to everyone afterwards. I guess to start off with, this is, as I've already said, a pretty raw film in lots of ways. Um, can you maybe start, I guess, by telling us, how it came to be and kind of how how this came to be your first feature film? What was the journey to making this your first feature film?
It certainly wasn't the first feature film I was planning on making. I'd written other ones, and I had other sort of projects in the pipeline. And parallel to those things happening, I was sort of living what was happening in He Ain't Heavy. Um, my career sort of, I guess my career was starting to blossom, and I was sort of finding myself, on film sets, literally lying to people to leave, to put myself into crazy situations because, how far would you go for someone you love? And it then sort of dawned upon me that, well, put it this way, I got to the point where I contemplated kidnapping my own brother to save his life. And that's the level of desperation I had arrived at after years and years and years of trying everything. And from there, that sort of provoked the thought. And then, of course, it sort of leans itself into an achievable first-time film. It's small amount of cast and not a huge budget. But the thing that really kicked it off is I made a short film just really to explore the idea. And to be honest, I was just trying to get comfortable even having conversations about what was happening in my life. I think a lot of people who experience this stuff also experience a lot of shame. And so I made the short film, and I was just dipping my toes in the water. And then the short film did really well. And I went to this screening in Austin Film Festival. And, I just get played, and I was kind of like, cool. And they had the shorts, and I was just leaving the cinema. And then this young sort of girl or woman, she must be 14, like grabbed me by the arm. She's like, my mum's an addict. I've never told anyone my entire life. Can you please help me? And then I got to the cinema foyer, and there was literally just people waiting to share their experiences. And what I sort of realized, of course, is when you share, it sort of encourages other people who maybe to be seen and felt heard. And then I realized, I was like, wow, this is a really big thing, and I think it's worth telling as a feature film. And then, of course, went into the process of making the feature film, and cut open your heart and write with the blood.
Yeah, I mean, it's really kind of, I guess, I think great to, I guess, hear those perspectives. 'Cause I think sometimes when we watch films, even films that deal with difficult topics, we don't always necessarily understand, where it's coming from, what the kind of motivations were. And one of the things that I kind of love about this film is, it's quite cathartic in lots of weird, interesting ways, I think, and important ways. Like, as a viewer, it's very cathartic, but as a filmmaker, um, how did you kind of navigate, I guess, the closeness to the material, because it deals with such weighty themes, obviously, which are difficult enough to make, I guess, in some senses, even if you don't have the kind of direct lived experience of that. Also, I suppose, having had that experience, you have a more intimate knowledge of it. But how did you blend that need to address those issues, but also the need to tell a story, right? You've got to make a film that's engaging and interesting.
Yeah, so when you sort of blend the personal with cinema, it's easy to get carried away also with your own story, and you got to invite the audience in as well. So I was really conscious of not showing any drug use in the film, naming substances, because that's created a space for the audience to have be in conversation, and see their own story. I think also you have to work out why you're making a film. Filmmaking is really difficult, and I think it's hard enough even just writing a screenplay. And so you've got to really understand what is the thematic questions and statements, and really understand, it's this active sort of alive thing that you're sort of provoking. And that was something I was wrestling with in reality, and so that was really driving the process. So I think any film, even if it's a romantic comedy, they're probably the best ones are driven still with someone trying to wrestle or make sense of something in their lives or in the world. So I think you need that as one thing. And audiences feel that when they watch a film, because yes, there's the conflict and the characters, but there's this underpinning of this sort of philosophical debate. So that was driving. The second thing is, yeah, when you're doing something personal, I think you have to arrive at the place where you're comfortable to engage with that material, because you will be stepping on step into moments that are, in the moment of the film with the glass shard, that's a real moment from my life. And it's severely downplayed in the film as to actually how it went down in reality. And so you can imagine, if you're standing on set, if you're not in a place that's right, that's not going to go well. So during the writing process, it just became about going, oh, this feels uncomfortable in my stomach. I need to actually lean into that because I'm telling the truth, make peace with that. And by the time the filmmaking came round, it was okay. It wasn't as traumatic actually as it looks when we were filming. And it was also about creating the right on-set environment, that everyone's comfortable, everyone's at peace. There's time and space. People need to, obviously it's not just triggering for me, it could be triggering for crew members. So you need to create, when you make a film like this, it's not just about banging through the scenes and shots. You need to allow and welcome people into scenes and enough time to exit the scenes. And so it was all like a family doing it, and I was at a place where, like, if I was crying at the monitor, I wasn't going, oh no, this is bad. It's like, it's all good, and I think you have to be vulnerable with the cast, but then strong enough to lead the production.
It's interesting what you're listening to what you're saying there, because obviously I feel like there are all sorts of parallels between you and the lead character, in the sense of the kind of that going through that process, but also I suppose going through those kind of steps of getting comfortable with, I don't know if getting comfortable with trauma is the right way to put it, but kind of
engaging with it and making sense of it.
Yeah. And I think, again, I think that's one of the things that makes this such a powerful film. I think it's the sort of film that in the wrong hands could feel kind of exploitative. I think
absolutely, you need to make sure that his story, he's a human being, and it's complicated. No one wakes up suddenly and decides to start attacking their family unless they're sort of psychotic, you know. And how do we track how that happens to someone? And people feel guilty and devastated that they're even behaving like that. You know, it's incredibly complicated, and you know, not everyone understands what to do. No one's planning to be in that situation, and I think you know, everyone's kind of making it up as they go unless they're literally a counselor. And so, you know, as a society, I think we're doing a lot better, but it's also about making sure we don't judge people. You know, the person in the street, you don't know why they ended up there. And they certainly didn't choose to be there. And it's a series of, you know, sometimes failings by the systems that we have in place that are supposed to catch people, you know. So it's really all about that.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's one thing that definitely comes through, and I'm sure everyone is probably nodding nodding along in the audience. But I think, you know, the importance of empathy, I suppose, and the importance of kind of understanding other people's situations before you act, before you judge, all those kinds of things are kind of clear kind of things that are kind of clearly underpinning this. Um, you know, obviously, I can't talk to you about this film without talking about those three amazing performances. You know, given all those things you've just said, given it's such an important story to you, how did you go about casting this? Aside from all the limitations that you have as a kind of, you know, low budget film, all that sort of stuff, you also have, you know, you want to be able to get actors that you know are going to be able to, I guess, inhabit these characters and to kind of bring that story to life. So how did you go about casting the film, and of course, you know, how do you go about getting someone like Greta involved?
Yeah, so I'm a big believer that you know, if you just tell the truth or you work on your story, it will, you know, a good screenplay takes time, and if you work on it, it will go to the place it needs to go. So first of all, I met Sam. I'm a tutor at a university, and he attends a place called Whopper, which is an amazing acting school. Hugh Jackman and all these people went, and I work at the film school, and I met him when he was a student, and I told him about the short film and wanted to develop it. And we just bonded. And he's like a beautiful human being, sort of very spiritual, you know, wise beyond his years. And we just connected, not about the story, just as human beings. Years passed by. He's a successful Viking, you know, on Netflix. And then this film came around to casting. And it was always for me like, it's about casting the right people who have that empathy and that humanity. And he just struck me, rather than thinking of him as an actor, but as a human being, as the right person for this film. Then what was really fortunate was, you know, he came on board after he read the script, and his agent represents Layla and Greta. And so that sort of came back to us. And then, you know, they read the script, and you know, they really appreciated the material. And we had I mean, Layla had an amazing conversation, and Greta, and, you know, Greta is a great it's such a highly intelligent sort of cinema thinker. And I think when we got in conversation and we were talking about all these people and Christoph Maslowski and Charlie Chaplin, and she sort of realized, you know, I have a deep passion about cinema. So she's like, you know, I feel like we're going to be making cinema. And you know, that's what motivates her. So that's why they sort of came to the party. Then, of course, you know, what a blessing for me on my debut film to have those three together. And they left nothing on the table. They just brought it. And, you know, in terms of working with them, it's about collaborating as well. You can't just put I want you to mirror my life and my family. You know, the best way to direct actors is to go, how can I help support you in your process and allow the performance to come from the inside out, and the way they can connect to it. So they brought a lot of their own story and personality to it. And that really enabled them to connect with the material. So as long as the greater theme was being communicated, I wasn't trying to sort of transplant everyone's existence onto them.
Yeah, for sure. Well, speaking of the themes, how has the film been received in Australia? What's the reaction been like to the film?
Been really great. Like at the festivals, we had the same reaction. Sydney and Melbourne Film Festival, I was in the streets till 3 a.m. talking to people about their families. I was talking to people who worked in rehab centers, nurses, lawyers who are dealing with families, recovering addicts, recovering gambling addicts, all kinds of people, and just feeling like their story was being heard and seen. So it's been going really well in terms of just that, I guess, the reception and like feeling like it wasn't an exploitive story, but people were getting, um, and some people have been using it as a device to have conversations with their family and friends. And so this is like a tool we can use to explore this subject. So that's been really wonderful. And it's just been really nice because the film, I don't know the answer. Because if I knew the answer, I'd be on YouTube creating a 5-minute video going, look, if you ever find yourself in this situation, these are the things you do. Now I have probably better strategies and understandings of what to do. But I thought I didn't want to present that in the film because it's quite nuanced and everyone's story is different. So it's been really wonderful, everyone being able to bring sort of their own story and being able to just feel like they've been seen and heard. And it's sort of almost been like this, it's kind of funny, like we toured the East Coast, me and Sam, and it almost felt like this spiritual healing tour where we just like go to a cinema and the cinema almost became a church and everyone would just sort of open their hearts, which, you know, is really beautiful. I don't think you can do that on a couch with a streaming service.
No, exactly. And I think even watching it on a couch, you kind of get the honesty, you get the kind of like the empathy, all these things come across. So it's great to hear that obviously audiences are really connecting with it. It must be really gratifying for you, not just as a filmmaker, but just as an individual having gone through this situation yourself.
Totally, it is. And it's you know, it's when you're a filmmaker, you can spend a lot of time thinking about what am I going to do, what am I going to communicate, and it can be really, you can overthink it. You can try and predict how the world's what's the smart choice to make as a film. And in the end, I just thought I just need to tell, you know, what am I talking about in my personal life and exploring and trying to make sense of, and just use the lens that I understand, which is the camera. And you just kind of feel relieved when it actually translates what you wanted to communicate is being, you know, communicated. And you know, I certainly took some risks with this film, and you know, didn't listen to certain advice about adding more genre elements, making it more of a thriller, making it even a horror, making it, you know, the bikies or whoever come up to the house and it suddenly becomes straw dogs. You know, for me, it was really important about, it's about humanity and interpersonal relationships. And that's a risk because when you make a drama like that, suddenly it becomes harder to market. But I feel really proud that, you know, I stuck to, or Jess and I, we really stuck to the integrity and the intention of the film. And as a result, people are relating to that.
Yeah, completely. And I mean, this is something that we were thinking about with the festival and kind of, you know, having this as the closing film. It's, you know, yeah, it would be easier to sell if it was a more straightforward thriller or a horror, but it wouldn't, as I said before, that, you know, then you're getting into exploitation territory and you're not going to be making the same kind of honest film in the same way. So thank you for making the film the way you did. I think I'm sure our audience will very much have appreciated it. Just finally, before I kind of wrap up, I guess the other question is, you know, we're screening in London, so how significant is it for you, I suppose, for this film to travel internationally?
I think this is a universal story. I think we're all learning, you know, especially since COVID, we're all sort of learning how to deal with each other in much more intensive ways, especially with the cost of living being sort of a universal problem. And I think, you know, people's wounds are probably boiling to the surface, and how we communicate with each other, support each other, and heal rather than just punish people is really important. And so for me, you know, yes, it's nice to, you know, have a play in lots of cinema screens and streamers, but the more gratifying thing is actually when it really connects with people and it can have an impact on their life, even if they, you know, can have a conversation with someone. And that goes beyond any monetary, you know, thing you can get from the film. So look, if it can continue to just travel and it meets the right people at the right moment in their life, you know, then I'm really happy that we made this film. And if that has affected even just one person in this cinema, then, you know, it was worth the effort.
Yeah, perfect, for sure. I mean, I'm sure there are probably people in the audience who has connected with on a really deep level. So, you know, even if people don't have direct experiences of this, we'll get that just from watching the film about how important a story like this is to tell. I guess the kind of classic final question is kind of, you know, what's next? Obviously, this is your debut feature film. I'm sure you're busy with just general life as we all are, but do you have are there things coming up that we should be looking out for?
Yeah, so I've got a lot of projects at different stages that I've obviously been writing over the years. Couple I can talk about publicly, some I can't. So probably the one I can most publicly talk about, I've been writing for many years a project that's is actually a really big passion project of mine called The Jesus Machine, which is a science fiction film really wrapped in empathy about the transformational powers of love. And that was actually that was the dream first film, and then the budget and the scale, shifted to the second film. So hopefully Hand Heavy's helping to now make that happen. So that'll be hopefully sort of the next film. It's kind of like an Akira meets The Road, but sort of set in the Australian landscape. And I want to try and keep that same voice and that same openness from Hand Heavy, but obviously just wrap it up in a slightly higher concept. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to hopefully within the next year or two, fingers crossed, shooting that.
That sounds amazing. I'm looking forward to that. And if that has even just a smidge of that empathy that Hand Heavy has, I'm sure it'll be an amazing thing. That's just about all we've got time for, but I just want to finish by, again, thanking you, David, for a really wonderful film. And I guess, yeah, any final things you want people to hear out there?
Well, first of all, thank you for coming. Please go to the movies. If you had the experience, or you're thinking, wow, wasn't it wonderful? Or after the foyer, and you're talking to someone in the foyer going, that was a wonderful experience. That's the cinema experience. So, return to the festival and festivals. It's an amazing place. And I guess, yeah, thank you, of course, for watching the film. And, life is complicated. Hug people and wrap arm around people and, be good to each other, and that's all I can say, and thank you so much.
No, that's perfect. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in thanking this year's Cris Jones Debut Director Prize winner, David Vincent Smith. Thank you, David.
Thank you so much. Thank you.